Good evening, Vananda. We welcome you all. We welcome you all to the International Symposium on Research and Publications of Environment, Health, Well-being and Sustainable Development 2023, commemorating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, nation celebrating 75 years of independence, and India's G20 presidency and UN Sustainable Development Goals 2015 to 2030 as part of awareness and campaigns, and commemorating World Health Week and World Health Month with the theme Health for All, in collaboration with Sri Holistic Health Foundation India and Sri Research Institute Center for Arts, Sciences and Wellbeing. Before we start our session, let's take the blessings of Almighty.
कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः.
With the blessings of Almighty, we shall continue with today's session. Today, we have with us Shraddhanjali Das Gupta. She is PhD research scholar and also a consultant psychologist, mental health advocate, and also an activist and counselor. She is presently working at Sharda Multi-Speciality Hospital, Barrackpore, Kolkata, West Bengal. And she is a very active speaker on various public forums and has been nominated for various awards and has won various awards for her credit and as active member of the society. She would be presenting on autism and autism spectrum disorder. We welcome you, ma'am. Over to you for your session.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, I'm not being able to present my screen, so yeah, I'm doing it right now, sir. Sir, is my screen visible?
Not yet.
Hello?
It's not yet visible. You can only your audio, we can hear your audio. We can't see you and we can't see the presentation. You can try unmuting yourself, starting your video and presentation.
Is it visible right now?
No.
Actually showing that the host can present the screen.
No, you are already co-host now.
So it's still showing that same.
Okay, let me again give you co-host permissions. Okay, now you can type.
Sir, without presentation, can I start?
What is the error you are getting exactly?
Sir, it's again showing the host. The host is only the presenter.
No, we have so many presentations going on now with the same platform. Why this error will come? Okay, I think there is a the speaker is facing some problem, so we will continue our yesterday's session, and then whenever our presenter joins back, then we shall continue with it. So yesterday we were discussing about research in social work as well as social sciences. I know these concepts can be a little bit difficult to understand for the people who are not much aware of these concepts. And for those who have already known, you may feel bored also, but we can always explore new things. Many people, many of us might not be knowing many things. So this provides an opportunity for all of us to learn together, and you can also contribute. Keep sharing your inputs in chat box if you have any additional information. Because of time constraints, I might have skipped, or due to making it more relevant or contextual, I have very much limited these presentations. So, yeah. So yesterday we were looking at identifying the research gap, and based on the review of literature, we were also looking at how to conduct a review of literature, and what are the various ways, sources, and how we can analyze and summarize and make a report of literature review. And then we also looked at arriving at hypothesis, framing hypothesis, and also framing rationale for selecting the topic and substantial citations or references related to our report, which are supporting our report based on review of literature. Then we will see other aspects, like we were searching for certain problems which can be addressed and which we are looking for various solutions. These problems might be existing or might be recent, and based on that, we might have already some solutions which have been found out and which have been implemented. So we also need to, when we are doing review of literature, we also need to look at the kind of problem and the kind of solutions the researcher has explored and the challenges the researcher faced in arriving at a conclusion. So did the research address the social problem? When we are doing a review of literature, did the particular article or a set of articles was successful in addressing the social problem? And we can also list some important facts or points from the literature review. And what are important conclusions or results from the research which we can or we might use in our paper, which we are going to prepare. Now, as we have already discussed with accessing knowledge, how do we access various database sources and various sources of literature and reading literature, and also correlating our research to our topic and how it is going to contribute to the existing knowledge of what we know and what we want to explore. And after the synthesis, we will also come to know how it can contribute to the research work. So the thesis statement or the problem statement or the research statement, what you are trying to prove. Like we have various hypotheses. What we are trying to do with this research, what we are trying to prove with this research, what claims we are making with the research, and on what base, on what grounds. It may be theoretical, or it may be empirical, or it may be evidence that is supporting our claim, and what warrants. That is, it may be your reasoning, rule, or principle connecting the claim and the grounds. And further, we also need to substantiate facts used to support or legitimize the warrant, and also acknowledge the argument may not be true for all cases. And finally, considering the both sides of the arguments. It may be applicable at all stages or in all cases. It may not be applicable in all cases. So what argument or what proposal, what hypothesis we are making or we are planning to present, what kind of evidence we have, what kind of report from the review of literature, or what kind of summary we have generated from the review of literature that might support or refute our research statement or research problem. And why do you think that your argument or your statement is true or false? So there are different types of research or articles or literatures where we can find each type or source, like seminal articles, empirical articles, theoretical articles, practical articles, qualitative articles, quantitative articles, meta-analysis, meta-synthesis, systematic review, gray literature, books. All these are sources of our literature. And also various sources already we have discussed. And when we are selecting a problem, when we are defining a problem, when we are putting our proposal for research, we also need to take a problem which is very significant, like the magnitude of the problem, the scope of the problem, and how many people are affected, or how much area is affected, or how many animals or how many species are affected with the problem or by the problem, and why this is an important problem. It can be a social problem, economical problem, financial problem, whatever it may be, why it is an important problem, and how it affects other important issues or focal pollution, populations. Whether initially it may have a small group that is being affected, but as over period of time, it may also be affecting a large number of population, indirectly or directly. So this brings out the important significance. The greater the impact, the more the significance. And why is, or what is our population, what is our sample, and why is our sample or population is important one to study. These are various problems or statements we need to analyze, which will help us to frame the research problem or research question or research statement. So through the review of literature, which we already know something about the topic, and through review of literature, we are trying to know what we do not know and what we want to know. So we have to describe all the information from the literature that is important to know about each variable, each aspect in your research question. So describe all the information from the literature that is important to know about the relationship between the variables in your research question. How we are going to select whether this article or this paper or this book or this chapter is relevant to my research, by identifying how it is related to our research question or problem, and also to know the relationship between various variables and how they are related to our research, and what other variables or factors influencing the variables in our research question. There may be various variables, dependent variables, independent variables, extraneous variables. A lot of variables are there, different kinds of variables. Maybe we each might be impacting other. So we also need to look at various variables and how they are related to our research, and how they can also impact our research or influence our research. And we also need to describe the target population or the target sample or target population, and also define key terms and explain theories. We need to operationally also define the variables and also explain the key terms and the underlying theories, or explain theories that are important for understanding your research topic. Identify consistent findings across the studies. Also identify gaps and controversies or the pitfalls or the lacunae in the literature. So when we are selecting or when we are framing a problem statement, why is this an important problem or a research problem so important to be studied. So how many people are affected, as we have seen, or how much area is affected, and how this problem is going to create an impact on various people or populations living around, and how it is relevant to your discipline in which you are doing research, and why is your target population an important one. And if we are able to answer all these queries, and you could strengthen your support to the research. Now, prepare an outline. All your information, whichever you have collected, put everything into one place, organize by topic. Like you can organize under headings, subheadings, and sentences, supporting your arguments, concluding sentences or statements. Also, look at exemplar seni and walk through or go through entire structure or outline and create one using a standard format. So a typical outline can be research problem, target population, and some outlines, raw outlines, and finding a non-empirical article like theoretical, philosophical, practical can also be included, and also collecting the stats or facts from other sources, from other authors, and it would also help someone to seek out the source. So what questions would they try to answer, and how does the resource build upon or challenge or relate to other literature on this topic? And why do you think this is reputable source or authentic source from a competent or trustworthy author? So all these queries have to be answered. So there are certain implications or ethical complications while choosing the population or the samples, a target population, especially when human subjects research involving a living individual about whom the researcher obtains data through intervention or interaction or identifiable private information, and also including non-human research subjects, also includes historical documents, media. We need to answer or question how this would help us to study your topic by using human subjects or non-human subjects. And which would be the appropriate? A combination of both, or whichever is more appropriate. And there are also ethical complications, like we have seen the famous Stanford prison experiment, which was conducted. And on what level the Stanford prison experiment was unethical? There are various levels: micro level, meso level, or macro level. And what are the long-term repercussions of unethical research? And discussing various aspects of unethical research, that is without informing or obtaining an informed consent, or without taking precautions in conducting a research. So when we are looking at ethics and various key terms in ethics, what we have to look in? First thing is, when we are engaging human participants, so the participants have the right of participation, and it should be voluntarily. Participants or the responders or the target population or the target sample should not be in any way pressurized or lured to be participating in the survey or the research. It should be completely voluntary, and they should not also be compelled to be withdrawn in the middle of the research. They have complete right to withdraw themselves at any point of research if they feel inconvenience, or if they feel any violation or any possible harm as part of the process. So it's a purely voluntary participation, and informed consent should be obtained with mention of all the legal rights the participant has, and also the researcher has, and the obligations and the risks, and also the benefits and the purpose of research, and also the data that is collected, and also the data collection, analysis, how the data is collected, how the data is stored, and how the data is analyzed, and where the data is shared and how it is shared, whether it is shared with any identification data, which might be private, violation of privacy, or it may be a summarized data without any identification information. So all this has to be mentioned clearly and in the informed consent, and informed consent has to be obtained from the participants. At all times, anonymity and confidentiality should be maintained, and there should be no or any kind of deception in the entire process. And we also have to ensure that there are no conflicts of interest, and we have to practice utmost honesty in reporting. And there might be such a vulnerable populations. Like yesterday we have also seen, say, suppose we are doing research on sexual exploitation, and even there can be a vulnerable population. The researcher may himself or herself be the victim in the past, present, or in the past or in the present, which might influence, or the target sample or the target population might also be victims who underwent in the past or were undergoing in the present. So all these are very much relevant, and these become the vulnerable populations. So we also have to be careful about these aspects. And there are also institutional ethical committees, review boards, which exempt involving minimal human subject involvement, as we have existing data, and expected present minimal risk of harm using existing record, survey, or interview or observation, or full present risk of harm to subjects, including vulnerable population like prisoners, women, children, etc. So either these boards or ethical committees can exempt you or expedite you or completely prevent you at various levels. And as we mentioned earlier, it might have at various levels, and we need to do research or inquiry at various levels, like micro level, based on the self or an individual, at a meso level, at a society level, community level, and at a macro level, at a community or society level, or at a institutional level, or at a policy level, at a national level, which has a larger context or larger scope. So based on that, and based on our scope of research, we also need to conduct the levels at different levels of inquiry. And we need to have research and theory, like what is reality? And what and how can I know reality? Knowledge. What is reality? Say, ontology. What and how can I know reality or knowledge? Epistemology. And what approach can we use to get knowledge? Theoretical perspective. And what procedure can we use to acquire knowledge? Methodology. And what tools can we use to acquire knowledge? Research methods. And finally, what data can we collect? The sources. And there are set of assumptions that can help us to understand and view the world, like positivism, where objectivity, deductive logic, empiricism, value-free science are assumed, and we have social constructionism, where subjectivity, social context and interaction, meaning, understanding, inductive logic is used, and we have critical paradigms. These are different paradigms: positivism, social constructivism, critical, postmodern. In critical paradigm, power, inequality, social change, value-based, social justice, oppression, and so on. And in postmodern paradigm, no truth, skepticism towards large sweeping theories. How do we understand a paradigm? When a scientist observes the world, he does so objectively. But there still might be certain subjectivity, certain level of subjectivity or bias by the scientists. So it may be because of gender, race, class, ethnicity. As the idea of social science as objective itself is a problematic. Imagine if you are an owner of an NGO or a non-profit serving food to the insecure people of an disaster-affected area. So how do you look at through each of these paradigms, measuring the success or impact of your activity? So let's try to understand the approach of through various paradigms, measuring the success or impact of your activity of serving food to the insecure people in disaster-affected area. Through paradigm positivists, count the numbers, inputs, outputs, and outcomes. In constructionists, talk to people about their experiences and their stories. Through critical paradigm, analyze the power who defines success, numbers, or stories which can be used. And finally, the postmodernist paradigm, question knowledge. All explanations are incomplete, bound in historical and cultural context. So we can also have clash of paradigms, and we have various theories also. When we look at paradigms versus theories, we do have other theories like systems theory, conflict theory, symbolic interactionism theory, social exchange theory, and many other theories. Even psychodynamic theories, developmental theories, social behavioral theories, humanistic theories. So systems theory focuses on interrelations between parts of the society, how parts work together. In conflict theory, it focuses on who wins and who loses based on the way that society is organized. In symbolic interaction theory or interactionism theory, the focus is on how meaning is created and negotiated through interactions. Through social exchange theory, how behavior is influenced by costs and rewards. So through this, we can also conduct reasoning in any of the ways. We can use inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning. In inductive reasoning, gathering data at specific level of focus and looking for patterns, analyzing it, and developing a theory with a general level of focus. In deductive reasoning, theorize, hypothesize with general level of focus, and analyze data with analysis and formulate hypothesis and reject or support hypothesis with specific level of focus. So now, looking at other aspects of research, causality, reasoning, and paradigm Already we looked at paradigms and reasoning, that is inductive and deductive reasoning. In inductive reasoning and social constructionism, idiographic causality like deep understanding of subjective experiences and context, and stories and narratives from all individuals or groups' perspective. Many truths depending on situation, but with common themes. In deductive reasoning and positivism, nomethetic causality, predicting the future, generally from a small sample to large populations, numeric data from objective scales and measures, one truth is applicable in all situations. In nomethetic causal explanations, independent and dependent variable, it explains hypothesis and direction and various. We can deal with the explanations of independent and dependent variables, hypothesis and their direction, covariation, plausibility, temporality, and non-spuriousness, and various about control variables. What causal relationships are you studying in your research proposal or research problem? So put it on a paper. What are independent variables and what are dependent variables? And identify the causal relationship between these variables and frame your hypothesis, whether it can be a positive or negative or curvilinear. Meet the criteria for causality, covary, plausible, temporal order, or non-spuriousness, or others, and what other variables that could influence the relationship. You may also want to use these as control variables, like extraneous variables. Idiographic causal explanations are messy, start in one place and end up in other. So multiple causes, each of which interact with each other, steeped in context and history, which are subjective and story-driven. And start with some tentative hypothesis, get one story, get more, have them interact, and then create a theory. So theory building and theory testing. Why should research be driven by theory? And what theories are close to your heart? And what theories are common in your area of interest has to be explored. So which approach to be used, either deductive or inductive, to test theory and to build theory? So generally, research falls into two broad categories: descriptive versus exploratory versus explanatory. So we can mix together in the same project. The sequence and emphasis, triangulation, complementarity, following up, conceptualization is more time consuming. Say if we have idiographic causal explanations, social constructionist paradigm, descriptive or exploratory research, qualitative methods, inductive reasoning can be one category, and the other category, nomethetic causal explanations, positivist paradigm, explanatory research, qualitative methods, and deductive reasoning can be in other category. So when we are studying different variables, we have units of analysis and observation. What do you want to study? And who are you gathering data from? When might these be same or different? Whether they are individuals, whether they are groups, whether they are organizations. What's true for the group isn't necessarily true for the individual. This is ecological fallacy. And what's true for individuals isn't necessarily true for the group. This is reductionism. So we need to analyze these aspects. Which needs to be considered in research. And finally, refining the research question. The research question or the characteristics of a good research question is it is empirical, not ethical. It is written in the form of a question. It is clearly written or stated. It is not a yes or no. It has more than one plausible. It considers relationships among multiple variables. It is specific and clear about the concepts it addresses. It contains a target population. And based on the type of research, whether it may be quantitative research or qualitative research, your questions are in quantitative research, quantitative explanatory questions. Explanatory research like this causes that. Descriptive research, what are the basic features of that? And exploratory research, what's going on with that? They offer nomothetic causal relationships between independent variable and dependent variables. And based on your hypothesis, this is what do you think is the answer to your question. It can be positive, it can be negative. So what would a descriptive question look like? And what would an exploratory question look like? Any idea? So when we look at two kinds of research, nomothetic research, idiographic research, what comes to your mind? What do you notice about this kind of research? Control, predict versus listen and understand, clean and clear versus unpredictable and complicated, objectivity and math versus subjectivity and researcher as an instrument. And how to go about qualitative research questions. We have nomothetic questions and idiographic questions. So nomothetic questions, what is true for everyone based on theoretical testing, deductive reasoning, generalizability, prediction, which are quantitative, independent and dependent variables with clear causality and doesn't change during a study. Idiographic questions are what is true for a group of people in one time and place. Theory building, and inductive reasoning is used. Understand qualitative research, many variables and complicated connections, and open to change during a study. So these are the differences between nothetic, nomothetic, and ideographic questions. And finally, look at the feasibility aspect, whether it is feasible to conduct a research, take up the research. And we need to also, it is also important to look at the target population, stakeholders, that is funding agency who is funding you, and also at the theoretical base, like social sciences or any other discipline. So, to be put in other words, whether it is feasible to conduct, whether it is important to society, whether it is relevant to the scientific literature. Now, look at various measurements. Measurement is something which is mostly quantitative, which ascribes meaning to our variables. What we can see, what we can ask, and it defines in terms of observables using multiple questions based on theory. And we also need to define our terms in research, both conceptual definitions as well as operational definitions. So in the conceptual definition, it is defined in the terms of other concepts from theory and literature, looking at the literature reviews of your articles. Operational definition defines how you will measure the concept and what are the needs of indicators, and looking at the methods section of empirical articles and also at the mental measurements. And finding a working decision based on literature and theory. Create a measure, interview guide or focus group guide, content analysis guide, or anything that matches your working definition. Shift your measure and working definition based on what participants tell you, because they are the experts using inductive reasoning. And operationalizing your variables. Some variables are easy, some variables are complicated. So some variables are directly observable, some are indirectly observable. And some complicated variables are like constructs, multidimensional variables. These variables need multiple questions to measure correctly. Say, suppose index, we need a checklist. Scale, a weighted checklist, often using Likert scales. If it is typology, different categories. So operational definition must contain the variable being measured, the measure you will use, and how you will interpret that measure. So we don't create our own measures. There are a lot of measures. Let's know which can be readily used. Also, we need to look at the validity and reliability. We can have a different set of challenges, unreliable and invalid, unreliable but valid, reliable but not valid, both reliable and valid. How do we measure quality? A reliability that with consistency, test reset, inter-rater for observations and internal consistency. And with respective to validity, accuracy, pace, content, predictive, concurrent, does this give an accurate measure of the person's state, convergent, discriminate, like this give an accurate measure of the concept. And we have different levels of measurements. At categorical level, nominal, ordinal, continuous, interval, ratio. These are often thought as of interval or ratio. What level of measurement is valid and how do you show the measure is valid and reliable? Test your knowledge, and there are also certain problems in measurement. Conceptual definitions aren't real, and there might be systematic error in one particular direction. Measures may be missing something important, and there may be certain leading questions that can lead the respondents in a particular direction. And social desirability, acquiescence bias. And also there might be errors in all directions, random errors, measures that aren't perfect, or false negative, or false positive. And as mentioned, measures aren't perfect. We can have false negative or false negative, positive. We have these types of errors, type 1, type 2, type 3. And when we are talking about qualitative research, working conceptual definitions, creating interview questions, letting your participants guide your definitions of the terms so that you can revise your questions and you want to ask. Research as a measurement instrument, not scales or indices, etc. And talking about qualitative research. And words need human interpretation, trustworthiness, truth value, credibility, dependability, conformability, authenticity, like multiple perspective, creating change, fairness, these all are related to qualitative research. Now let's look at the sampling. After finalizing the instruments and measures, identify your key variables, including independent, dependent, and also define them, conceptual and operational, and also discuss about various strengths and limitations of how you can choose to measure each variable, identifying at least 2 control variables for your study. And when we are selecting a sample, we need to keep certain aspects to be considered. Are they representative of the population? We also need to consider the units of analysis and observation, the group or an entity of people we want to study to make conclusions about, that is target population. And the unit of observation is the items or the people you will be observing and measuring in your study, that is sample. So can be seen as sample is often a selection from the population, which is true representation of the population. And when we are selecting a sample, we need to look at the generalizability, sample generalizability, whether the results of the sample apply to the entire population. There might be sampling error. There is difference between sample and the population. So these sampling errors represent the differences between sample and the population. So it should be a representative sample, as a sample should look like or looks like population, and strength of the probability sample. So we have different types of samplings, like non-probability sampling techniques or approaches or methods, probability sampling techniques, approaches or methods. Like under non-probability sampling techniques or methods, availability, quota sampling, purposive judgmental sampling, snowball sampling, and unknown likelihood. In probability sampling approaches or techniques or methods, we have simple random, systematic, stratified, cluster, where we have equal likely. In the non-probability, there is an unknown likely. And non-probability sampling approaches has both strengths and limitations. Coming to strengths, in-depth understanding may be easier or more convenient, hard to reach populations, gather different perspectives, and theory building. But the limitations are non-generalizable, may not be a true representative. Risk of bias and error in sampling may be difficult to recruit from groups from diverse populations. But in case of probability sampling approaches, the strengths are generalizability, can generalize and reduce errors and bias, improving accuracy. Larger sample sizes have a greater explanatory power. And coming to limitations of probability sampling, may be costly or inconvenient, may be impractical for hard to reach populations, and possibly with each minority groups requires a real sampling frame, not hypothetical. So with this, here we will stop for today, and we'll take it up tomorrow about rest of the aspects, because it's again going to take good time for that. We request everyone to quickly fill up the feedback form.